He is pretty frustrated. He's really angry to the point where he can maybe even feel his heartbeat up in his ears. He's waiting to see what the outcome of his plan will be. His hands are sweaty. His knees are weak. His palms are heavy, But he's waiting to see, he's kind of even peering down from his vantage point, waiting to see what is about to happen as he looks into this fire. What will he be able to see? Will he be able to see anything? He knows what he expects to maybe not see. And this is the stage. This is where we're at. This is old Nebuchadnezzar, sitting, waiting to see what has happened now that he's thrown Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace. That's where we're at. That's where we're headed this week. Daniel chapter 3. If you've got your Bibles, you can start making your way there. And listen, I don't typically consider myself extremely courageous. I'm more in line with, what was that noise downstairs, Jen? Or even I'll just pretend to be asleep and maybe she'll hear it and go check. I've ashamedly done that as well. But I was thinking about that this week. I've told you this before. My pace quickens as I walk from the car to the front door, especially at dark. But there's this thing I was thinking about this week of Christian courage. What does that look like? How is that different from what the world deems as courageous now? And if you just do a quick Google search, Christian courage comes up. It's the willingness to act bravely in the obedience to God, facing challenges and uncertainties with faith and reliance on His strength, even in the face of fear. It's not an absence of fear, but rather the strength to act despite it, rooted in trust in God and His promises. And let me give this, because I think this is what we're going to see today, is we're going to look and we're going to see in Daniel chapter 3 what Christian courage really truly looks like. What it looks like in our text. Christian courage, if you were going to boil it down for us, kind of three things. Christian courage is, I believe that He can, I expect that He will, and even if He doesn't, I still trust. Let me say that again. I believe that He can, I expect that He will, and I trust even if He doesn't. So where we're headed today, what we're going to see today in the text, in Daniel 3, when we look at these three Hebrew teenagers, is what real Christian courage looks like in the face of the most extreme circumstances. And they choose courage, and a very unique form of courage, which we would call Christian courage. They believe that He can, they expect that He will, and they trust even if He doesn't. When you're in Daniel 3, let me hear you say a word. All right, here we go. We're going to walk through. Last week we made it through 50 verses. This week we only got 30, so we should be done in plenty of time for next year's graduation. So here we go. Daniel chapter 3. Again, let me hear you say a word when you're there. All right, here we go. Daniel chapter 3, we're right back. Remember, we finished last week where Daniel read, he gave the dream to Neb. And Nebuchadnezzar at the end of chapter 2 is very impressed with Daniel and his God, and in fact puts Daniel probably in his king's court. So Daniel's risen to a higher position. In chapter 3, we're going to read about Daniel's friends. Here we go. Chapter 3 says, King Neb made a gold statue 90 feet and 9 feet wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to the assembly, the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to attend the dedication of the statue that King Neb had set up. So all of those same people showed up to where he told them. Verse 4, look at verse 4. A herald loudly proclaimed, people of every nation and language, you are commanded, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the drum, the piano, the electric guitar, the box drum that you set on, every kind of music, you are to fall face down and worship the gold statue that King Neb has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Verse 7, therefore all the people that heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and every kind of music, people, every nation, every language, fell down and worshiped the gold statue that King Neb had set up. Verse 8, some of the Chaldeans took this occasion to come forward and maliciously accuse the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, may the king live forever. You as the king have issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the drum, and every kind of music must fall down and worship the gold statue. Whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. There are some Jews who you have appointed to manage the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're going to call them Rak, Shak, and Benny from now on. These men have ignored you. If you're a VeggieTales fan, that'll make a lot more sense to you. These men have ignored you. The king, they did not serve your gods or worship the gold statue that you've set up. Then in a furious rage, Neb gave orders to Rak, Shak, and Benny. So these men were brought before the king, and Neb asked them, Rak, Shak, and Benny, is this true that you don't serve my gods or worship the gold statue I've set up? And now if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and every kind of music, fall down and worship the statue I made. But if you don't worship, you will immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that can rescue you from my power? Listen, here's the thing I want us to kind of start out with. Christian courage is different. It's unique. It's a call to stand out. It's a call to be built differently. It's a call to stand on your convictions. Now, if you were here last week, you might be asking yourself, why is Neb so angry at this moment? It says he's furious that they won't bow down to him. The end of chapter 2, actually in verse 47, he actually talks about how Daniel's God is the God of all gods. It's the only one who could have declared his dream to him and made it known to him and gave him the interpretation. And for a good little bit, Neb is on board with God being the God of gods. He's the one true God. He's on board with that. But just like me and you, a lot of times after God has shown his true power to us, then we replace him with ourselves on the throne that he and he alone belongs on. So Nebuchadnezzar, he's been given this dream, and it talks about this statue in chapter 2. And he sees like his part of the statue is made of gold. So he sees this and he says, oh yeah? He said, if Jesus is supposed to crush all the other kingdoms, I'm going to make this statue totally of gold. And I'm going to show you that my kingdom is above everybody else's kingdom. And even though God has shown him this incredible power through Daniel's explanation of this dream, Neb once again goes back and says, you know, I still think I'm king of my own universe. So he's mad that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego are not willing to bow down to him. He basically is telling him like, hey, when Daniel said that, I acknowledged your God, so now you need to acknowledge mine. And Rak, Shak, and Benny have different plans. So here's the thing you need to know about Christian courage. It starts with a confession. Christian courage starts with a confession. And the confession is that Jesus and Jesus alone is Lord. There is no other option. It's Jesus and Jesus alone is Lord. Listen, it was not their faith in Jesus or faith in God that caused the problems for our boys today in the story. It's the refusal for them also to acknowledge the divine authority of Neb. That's the problem. That's what infuriates him. And I want you to hear this morning because nothing has changed today in our Babylon, in our world. Faith in Jesus is not the problem. It's your insistence that Jesus is the one and only way to salvation, and his word is the only word that we should be listening to. That is the thing that will get you in trouble today. You'll never get in trouble for just saying, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Jesus is my personal Savior. But you will when you say there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. And that he and he alone sets the rules about what is right and what is wrong, what is right when it comes to morality, what is right when it comes to marriage, what is right when it comes to sex and identity, what is right when it comes to money. He and he alone says what is right and what is wrong. That's the only thing. Because listen, our culture says it's fine for you to worship Jesus. It's fine for you to call Jesus your Lord, but you just need to edit him to fit my preferences and my desires of what the world is saying is now up to date and what is current culture. That's where there's a difference. But listen to me. For you as a follower of Jesus, this is not an option. This is not an option. You don't get to edit the Bible to fit your narrative. If you go to the Smithsonian, they have like Thomas Jefferson's Bible. If you've ever heard this, Thomas Jefferson has parts of the Bible taken out. He edited his Bible, the one that's in the Smithsonian. It actually leaves out parts that he felt was a little bit cruel or didn't jive with the idea that he had of God. Listen, that is not how it works. You do not get an edited Bible. You do not get to change the things that don't make you feel good or you struggle to understand or comprehend. That's not how it works. Jesus is Lord. He is Lord of all, or he is Lord of none of it. He gets it all. He's the only one that says what is true and what is not true, and it doesn't matter what your preference or your personal opinion on that thing is. And that kind of belief, that kind of courage, that kind of confession is what will get you in trouble. Here's how Babylon or the world wants us to treat Jesus, right? Imagine has anybody rented a car recently? Like a rental car or something like that? They want you to view coming to Jesus like signing one of those rental car contracts where you can leave off certain options and pick up other things that you like. You're signing the car and getting ready to get it, and they ask you, like, do you want navigation? Do you want prepaid fuel? Do you want the prepaid tolls? Do you want the ridiculously overpriced insurance package that will give you a zero deductible in case a space station lands on your car at some point? Like, covers it all. Actually, I was in Arizona at the beginning of this year, and I was renting a car, and the guy's going through this same thing, and he's selling the perk package, and I'm like, no. And he's like, how about this? For just $18 a day, you can get insurance that covers anything. It covers anything that it could cover theft. It would cover anything that would happen to your car. He said, it even covers flood damage. And I was like, really? I'm in Phoenix. Is that a big thing here in the Desert Valley? And I think at that point he was like, I was not prepared to answer or come back to this. It's like, floods. You get many of those here? He's like, I don't know. I'm new here. Right? But this is how many people want you to serve Jesus. They need you to edit the things about him that don't fit into their moral viewpoint. Listen to me. Christian courage starts with confession, and confession that Jesus is Lord. He is Lord, regardless of how we may feel about that. And listen, these guys stood here. When everyone else bowed, they chose to stand. Even though they're going to eventually be thrown into a fiery furnace. Listen, the entire empire got to see the reality of the God of Israel and what he is worth to them. It's on display for the whole country. Listen, do you know, scholars would say that ultimately you can trace back the faith of the wise men that came to see Jesus. Remember at Christmas we talked about the wise men that came to see Jesus. They are not part of your nativity set, remember? They need to be far, far away. But the wise men that came to see Jesus would eventually come from this group of believers. And some scholars even trace it back to this very instance, that the faith of the wise men and them beginning to look for the coming Messiah would come to this and go all the way back to this encounter where 3 teenage Hebrews stood up for what they thought was right. Not what they thought was right, but what they believed was right. Here's what I'd ask us is, will future generations, what will they say about our courage? will they say about our convictions? What will they say about our testimony into this generation? Will they be able to point back to a place where they began looking for what God was going to do in their generation because of the courage, the conviction, and the testimony that we began to lay out in front of them in this very day? Because listen, their eternal future depends on your courage, your conviction, and your testimony in the present day. Will they say that we stood in the face of Babylon and we declared Jesus is Lord of all? Or will they say we bowed to the world just like everybody else? Let's keep going. Look at verse 16. 16 through 18 is where we're going to get the crux of our message today. 16 through 18, it says, Rakshak and Benny replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. The question was, what God can save you from me? He said, we don't need to give you an answer from this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from a furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, king. But if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship your gold statue, not for 1 minute, not for 1 second. We won't do it. Christian courage believes. Christian courage starts with an I believe that he can. And sometimes we struggle even at this very first step. I believe that he can. And maybe it's your past, maybe it's what's going on in your life currently where you're struggling. I just don't know that I don't know that I can believe that he can do this thing. The first thing we notice about these 3 teenage boys is they understand just how big their God is. They understand just how big he is. They believe that their God can save them from anything the king puts in front of them, including a blazing fiery furnace. They're turning up the heat on them, and they still believe that he can. Listen, there's millions of people out there that are watching these guys, and they're thinking, look how small these 3 little Hebrew boys look up against the big, powerful, mighty King Neb. Look how small they look. And these 3 guys are thinking, look how puny little Neb looks up next to my king. Look how small he seems compared to the big God that we serve. This is where courage begins. God is bigger. He's bigger than your problems. He's bigger than the things that are going on in your life. It's a belief that he can overcome the obstacle in your life. No matter what that thing is for you, God is bigger than that thing. Like, you have to believe that thing in your soul. It's almost like, do you ever... we went to Play Day this week, and some of the stories from kindergarten are awesome. One kid had a jet that goes underwater, and his whole family, they just keep it at their house. I loved it. I was anxious to see that. I was waiting for my invitation. I did not get it, right? When I started to ask some questions about it, we poked some holes in the jet theory, but that's all right. It was still good. But like, you ever been around one of those kids that just believes their dad can do anything, literally anything? It's like you said at lunch for kindergarten, and it's like a one-up battle. Oh yeah, well, my dad can do this. My dad can do this. The bike's broken, no problem, my dad can fix it. We're stuck, no problem, my dad can pick up the car and move it. There's a monster in the closet, no problem, my dad can handle that. He has 64 guns in his house. They don't care about the details. They just believe. There's something about knowing Dad has a track record of showing up that gives them complete confidence in that. They believe that he can. That's how faith in God begins. Before you even know what he will do, you believe that he can do it. That's where Christian courage starts. Listen, Rakshak and Benny stood in front of the most powerful king on the earth, facing death, and they said with childlike confidence, our God will deliver us. That's courage. It's believing in power of your Father in every situation, even when it looks impossible. I believe that he can. Listen, I believe that he can. It's the most basic principle of faith. God is bigger than our problems, any of them. He's bigger than cancer. He's bigger than a lost job. He's bigger than a broken marriage. He's bigger than your friends. He's bigger than a death. He's bigger than everything in your life. He's bigger than your sin. He's bigger than your shame. He's bigger than the grave, because if the grave is empty, then anything is possible. He's bigger than all of those things. And if you're his child, nothing happens to you without his permission. Not even a single thing happens without his knowledge or his permission. Do you believe that he can? Christian courage believes that he can. Listen to me. Turn to your neighbor and say, I believe he can. That was not good. Clap twice if you can hear me. Turn to your other neighbor and say, I believe that he can. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Listen, Christian courage means I believe that he can. It means that I expect that he will. Notice the words in verse 17. It says, he will rescue us from even you, King, the power of you. I believe that he can, and I believe that he will, and I expect that he will. Listen, how did they know that? How do you begin to expect that he will? How did they know that? A little secret, they didn't. Sorry. You see the next phrase in verse 18 is like, but even if he doesn't, that's how we know that they didn't know that. They didn't know how this was going to turn out. Listen, they had no direct promise. There was no secret huddle where God pulled them aside and said, hey, this is how this is going to go down. This is what this looks like. This is the next step. Here's the next 5 steps. But they had this expectation in their heart that God would deliver them because they understood God's goodness and his willingness to showcase his power and his glory. Can I tell you a little secret? Many of the great feats that we read about in the Bible were not done in direct response to a command of God with a promise guaranteed to it. He didn't guarantee how it would turn out. Many of the ones you see are like that. But listen, Christian courage is not just believing that he can, it's expecting that he will. It's not just believing that he can, it's expecting that he will do the thing that he's promised. Now listen, let me sidebar this for just a second, because this is not to say that God is like some magic genie lamp that you just rub, and if you rub it the right way, he'll give you exactly what you want. Sometimes God, in his goodness, tells us no, or tells us to wait. It's just to say that in this story, and in multiple times throughout the Bible, God rewards those who take a dare on his goodness and those who expect that he will. It's almost, Jen has this picture that she shares of Brady, and he's like 2 or 3, and like he's waiting at the window, like looking out the window, and he's like, just in this little bitty chair, he's waiting at the window, and he's waiting for me to come home, and he's literally saying like, Daddy's not coming, Daddy's not coming, Daddy's coming, Daddy's not coming. But he's like, his face is glued to this window, and he's just expecting for me to show up. That's why, because Dad said he was coming home. Listen, if you think about it, if you get this image of a kid waiting at the window, he's not wondering what Dad meant when he meant he was coming home. They're not checking the calendar or asking for a backup plan. They're watching because they expect it to happen. They expect to see him coming down the road. This is what it looks like to expect God to show up. It's not arrogance, it's childlike confidence. It's rooted in God's goodness because he said he would do it. Listen, Rakshak and Benny looked at the fire and said, our God will deliver us, not because they had special powers, but because they had a deep trust in the Father's character. It's the kind of faith that stares at the flames and still watches at the window. I believe that he can, and I expect that he will. Listen, my question for you is, where do you need to take a chance? Where do you need to dare to step out into faith and expect that he will? Is it reaching out to share your faith to someone at work or school, even though it's awkward? Is it maybe taking a courageous stand at work, even though it looks like it might cost you in the short term? Maybe it's persevering through a prayer request, even though God hasn't answered it yet, but expecting that God's goodness will break through soon. Maybe it's submitting an application to be a foster parent. Maybe it's stepping into one of those kids' life. Maybe it's calling the estranged family member, even though you don't know how they'll respond or how they'll react when you reach out to them. Maybe it's reaching out to the prodigal, even though you've tried it over and over and over again. You say, I'm going to keep trying, and I expect that he will. Maybe it's financially for you guys, asking you to put your money on the table, but it scares you to death because you don't know where all the money is going to go. We barely have enough to pay our bills. What do you mean that you want me to give you some of this? And it's scary. I don't know what your thing is, but maybe you need to take a dare on his goodness today and expect that he will. Believing that he can, but expecting that he will. Listen, everybody turn to your neighbor and say, I expect that he will. Turn to your other neighbor and say, I expect that he will. Listen, finally, Christian courage, trust him even if he doesn't. And this is the more difficult part for us. You see, the thing here is sometimes you take a stand and God delivers for you because you believed that he would, you expected that he will, and he shows up. Sometimes you take a stand and you expect that he will, full confidence, full send, and you suffer just like Jesus did. The question you have to ask is, if he lets me go into the fire, is he still enough for me? If he sends me into the fire, is he enough? And listen, the only way you'll have the courage to suffer for what is right is if you believe truly, wholeheartedly, you believe that Jesus is enough. If everything else falls apart, everything else falls away, if you still believe that Jesus is enough, you lose the job, you lose a family member, you lose someone close, whatever. If you believe that Jesus is enough, that's the only way you'll make it through the fire. It's the only way that you'll stand when everyone else bows. Okay, let me show you. Turn to your neighbor and say, this is the good part. All right, here we go. Are you ready for this? Because I'm going to show you this. This is so good. And I'm already through my Red Bull, so let's get going. Here we go. Let me show you this. Here's why he's enough. Not just for these 3 Hebrew boys, but for you too. And in this story, it's a promise directly to you. A lot of times when you read God's word, you're like, how does that work for me? Yeah, but what does that mean for me? This is it. Let me read you this last part. We're going to read 19 through the end here. Then Neb was filled with rage. The expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He gave the orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was customary. He commanded some of the best soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fiery furnace. So these men in their trousers, I love this as trousers. Trousers, robes, head coverings, and other clothes were tied up and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Since the king's command was so urgent, the furnace extremely hot, the raging flames killed those men who carried Rakshak and Benny to go up. And these 3 men, Rakshak and Benny, fell bound into the furnace of the blazing fire. Look at verse 24, because then we start to see don't call it a comeback, but here we go. 24, it says, the king Neb jumped up in alarm, and he said to his advisors, didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? They said, yes, of course, your majesty. They replied to the king, and he exclaimed, I see 4, not tied, not burning, not disappearing. They're walking around in the fire unharmed. The 4th looks like the Son of God. He said, we saw 3 in there, right? They're like, yeah, we did. Yeah, we threw 3. 1, 2, 3. And we lost like 4 others because they died, right? I saw 3. That's not one of those guys. Those guys died immediately, right? He said, I see 4 guys, and one of them looks like the Son of God. Neb then approached the door of the furnace of the blazing fire, and he called out. He said, Rakshak and Benny, servants of the Most High God, come on out. So Shadrach, and Benny came out of the fire, and when the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's advisors gathered around them, they saw that the fire had no effect on their bodies of these men. Not a hair on their head was singed, and their robes were unaffected. There wasn't even a smell of fire on them. Listen, I grilled last night, and I felt like I smelled like smoke for like 4 hours. I could have taken 2 showers and still smell. These guys went into a fiery furnace, and you couldn't even smell a smoke on them. Verse 28, Neb exclaimed, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel. He rescued his servants who trusted in him. They violated the king's command and risked their lives rather than serve or worship a God except their own God. Therefore, I issue a decree that anyone, any people, nation, or language who say anything of offense against the God of Shadrach and Benny will be torn limb from limb and their house made a garbage dump. For this is no other God. For there is no other God who is able to deliver like this. There is no other God who is able to deliver like this." Then the king rewarded Shadrach and Benny with a providence in Babylon. Listen, is he enough for you? There was a fourth man in the fire. And because of that, they came out of that flame totally unharmed. Stay with me on this, because this is what it is for us. This is what it all means. This is a foreshadowing of Jesus going to the cross for you and for me. Jesus was thrown into the fires of judgment for us, and because he did, we came through the judgment totally unharmed. The hair on our head not singed by judgment, our clothes not burned. He took the flame so we could emerge safely. Not a trace of judgment anywhere on our bodies or our clothes. Not a smell of judgment on us. Only the ropes of bondage to sin were burned away. Woo! What that means is this. He went into the ultimate fires of judgment for you and for me. He went to the cross. He kept us totally safe and free from harm. My question is, don't you think he'll protect you from the fires that you're going through? Listen, the God who died for you on the cross is the God who will protect you in the fire. Let me say that again. The God who died for you on the cross is the God who will protect you in the middle of your fire. Listen, church, we are after some faith that keeps us from the fire and keeps us safe. But I'm here to tell you, you need the one who will protect you in the midst of the fire, because you're going to be in it. Listen, high schoolers, you're going to be in it as soon as you leave. You've graduated. Congratulations. You're now an adult. Now you have to start making big kid decisions. You're going to be thrown into the fire immediately. And listen, the God who died for you on the cross will be there for you in the middle of that fire. The presence of Jesus was with these 3 Hebrew teenagers in the furnace, and his presence will be with you in the furnace into which he puts you into. And I say he puts you into, because not a thing happens in your life that he's not aware of or gives permission to. And that is difficult for us to hear. Listen, the God who died for you instead of you on the cross is the same God who can protect you in the fire. Turn to your neighbor and say, I trust even if he doesn't. I trust even if he doesn't. There's a story of like a famous piano player. And like it's a world-class piano player, and this small town has kind of pulled all their money together and brought it in to have this guy come in and play. And as they're delivering his piano, something happens and it's damaged. Some of the keys aren't working. The organizers are embarrassed. They're apologizing profusely and just offering to cancel the event and do anything to make this situation better. And the pianist says, it's fine. I'll still play. It's fine. I'm already here. I'll still play. And he did. Played flawlessly. He adjusted, he improvised, he made the most beautiful music, even with the broken keys. And after the concert, someone asked him, he said, how did you make it sound so good even though the piano was broken? And he smiled and he says, I don't play because everything is perfect. I play because I've learned to trust the music even when the instrument is flawed. That's what faith looks like for us in the fire. It's trusting in the composer of your life even when things aren't working the way you had hoped. Listen, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, even if he doesn't. They didn't worship God for what he did. They worshiped him for who he is. Same thing can be said. One of my favorite books is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. And if you're a big history buff, especially like in the face of adversity and Christian adversity, it's a great book for you to read. But after World War II, Corrie, she writes this book called The Hiding Place. She's a survivor in a Nazi concentration camp. And she returns back to the place where she had lost so much. It's her and her sister and her family. And she loses her father and her sister both in this same concentration camp. And she loses her sister Betsy. And they had prayed to be rescued. They had prayed for strength. They had prayed for deliverance. But her sister Betsy doesn't make it. And later on, Corrie writes in her book that she stood beside her sister's unmarked grave and placed a small stone or a marker there that said, Jesus is the victor. Not we won, not he fixed it, not he saved us. Jesus is still victor. Even though God didn't deliver the way that she had prayed, she still believed that he was good, he was sovereign, and he was trustworthy. It's the kind of faith we see in Daniel 3. Rakshak and Benny looked into the fire and they said, even if he doesn't. That's not weak faith, that's refined faith. Faith that's not based on outcomes, but based on who God is. Listen, Christian courage looks different. In a world that says you must bow to our preferences, our desires, we begin to make a difference by waking up every single day and saying, I believe that he can, I expect that he will, and I trust if he doesn't. Let's stand and pray. Father God, Lord, I think we can all find ourselves in one of these spaces, Lord. Whether we believe that you can, God, or we're struggling even to believe and start at that starting point, God, that you're bigger than the things that are going on in our life. God, maybe we believe that you can, but we're struggling to expect that you will. God, maybe we do expect that you will, but we've been expecting it for a while and we're growing tired. And we're struggling to trust even if you don't. Lord, my prayer is that wherever we are at today, God, you will remind us of your faithfulness to us. That the God who died on the cross for us will forever protect us in the fire. Lord, my prayer is that we would take a stand, that future generations would look and see us and say, because of their courage, in the midst of their everyday life as they went to work or they went to school or in their family, because of their courage, that shined a light into me, God, that I was unable to deny, God, and I began to see Jesus in a new way. Or because of the courage that you have built up in us because of who you are, God, who your character is. Lord, remind us of that today in whatever space that we're in. God, if we're in a season where we're struggling through health, God, we're in a season where we've lost loved ones. God, if we're in a season where we're just unsure of what the next thing is, God, remind us of your character. And God, like a child with our face pressed against the window saying, I know that he's coming soon. God, remind us of your love, your grace, and your mercy for us today, God. Jesus, thank you for who you are and what you have done for us. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Here's what we do. if you're new to Crossroads, this is a chance where we bring our first and our best in this moment. We're going to sing as the worship team leads us. And if you need to pray, if you need to talk to him, if you're in the fire or you're on you can feel the flames, this is your chance to come and pray. Someone will come with you. Just come. Just come. That's all he needs is for you to come and for you to remember that in this moment, the same God who died on the cross for you will be in the fire with you. This is your chance to respond.